My name is John McKenna. I'd first of all like to start with the acknowledgement of country. Traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Wurundjeri Wurrung, who are part of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. As I mentioned, I'm John McKenna and very excited to be here today. Welcome to the first webinar of the Valid Conversation, a new webinar series centering on the voices of people with disabilities as leaders and experts. Today's webinar, From Living Experiences to Leadership, explores how people with disability use their living experiences to influence change and make a difference in their communities. So we've got some amazing guest speakers, which is going to make this a really interesting webinar because it's one of my favourite topics, people with living experiences and how they share their knowledge. I've got some dot points about our guest speakers, and I'm going to kick off with Ben Haack. So Ben's a leader for Special Olympics Australia. He has dedicated his life to shifting how communities think about disability, inclusion, and human potential. He recently wrote a book titled Reasons for Hope. Love that title. We'll have to talk more about that. The book is a practical, down-to-earth guide to raising happy, resilient children without trying to force the word normal. Ben has travelled the world advocating for people with disabilities and their rights to education, health, sport, and employment. So big welcome to you, Ben. Now we're going to introduce Judy Huett. Judy is a skilled leader who is widely admired and respected. In 2013, she was part of the Australian Civil Society delegation to the United Nations in Geneva, reporting on the UN CRPD. In 2019, she returned as a co-lead of the Australian delegation. Judy received the Tasmanian Disability Community Achievement Award in 2010 and 2020 for her long-standing commitment to promoting human rights for people with intellectual disabilities and developing advocacy skills. Wow, go Judy. William Ward-Boas. William is a proud gay First Nations man with ADHD and intellectual disability, advocates for disability rights, diversity and accessibility. William is also chair of Valid, board member of Inclusion Rainbow Voices, a community visitor under the Disability Act 2026. In 2024, William attended the United Nations CRPD Conference of State Parties in New York with AFDO, representing his communities internationally. He also runs William Ward-Boas Consulting and is studying politics and policy at Deakin University. That's not bad, just one little trip. So as you can see, we've got an amazing group of guest speakers, and I'm really looking forward to having a good chat with them with some questions. So question number one, this is going to go to Ben, of course. So Ben, question number one, who or what encouraged you to speak up in your life?
Yeah, so I've been encouraged through a variety of people and a variety of things. I've been encouraged, firstly, with my family, as I wrote in my book, who always encouraged me to be courageous and resilient and not be afraid to stand up for myself. I've also had encouragement from Special Olympics and an organisation called Gold Coast Recreation and Sport, which I currently work at. Those were the two places where I found my community and a sense of belonging. And yeah, so I've been encouraged to speak out at all sorts of places, at all sorts of levels, both here and internationally. Yeah, I've traveled around the world advocating for people with disabilities and their not only rights, but that it is the right thing to do to include them for a whole variety of reasons. And I've had that encouragement through. Well, yeah, I mean, when I was 17, I got diagnosed with a disability. We had no place to go. We ended up finding rec and sport and Special Olympics. And I found my mentor, who's the boss of that organisation, Anna Kasolki, and she's been my mentor ever since. And she's always, along with my family, always encouraged me to pursue, my passion for trying to, help people with disabilities and to help the community. And so they've always been there for me. They've always given me advice. They've always, given me guidance. And I've gone on a journey of developing my capacity and abilities to be able to do that, to be able to understand the world and how complicated it is, in terms of laws and that and funding and structures. And by doing that, it means I can be more effective in having a voice. So really, it's kind of like having a tribe. It's kind of like having a tribe of people that support you and guide you. So that's really what's been key for me to have a voice.
Thanks, Ben. Well, I do have to share two words of gold to use, the word tribe and mentor. And I think I so much believe as someone myself who has a living experience of disability, it's really important that you keep that in the back of your mind. You may not formalise that you've got a mentor, or you may not think you have a tribe, but it does exist. Thank you again, Ben. Judy, I'm now going to ask you the question, please. Who or what encouraged you to speak up in your life?
Thank you, John. So when I became a member of Speak Out, I learnt to speak up in groups. But I learnt from a great person who is a leader and someone I can look up to. And they've helped me put forward presentations and taught me to speak up for myself, but not only myself, but other self-advocates. Also, my family have helped me a lot along the way, and supported me through all this. I guess my mentor has given me the confidence to help others speak up for themselves as well.
Thanks so much, Judy. That's great. William, moving on to you, please. I'll repeat the question. Who or what encouraged you to speak up in your life?
Thanks, John. And really good answers from Ben and Judy. I think I originally learnt from my parents because they were my first form of real support, I think, in the world and navigating the system. And before I even landed in advocacy, they were really the people pushing for me to embrace my disability and other identities. And I think coming to Valid really changed something within that self-advocacy component because I got to learn from self-advocates, and a few examples are Heather Forsyth, Luke Nelson, and Judy Huett here. I got to learn from in my 7 years, and I got to appreciate all of that hard work that was done prior to me even existing back in the institutionalization days. And I think learning from that history and what current advocacy looks like is where I really got a voice from. And then I became an advocate myself.
Thanks, William. Next question, I'll go back to Ben, and there's one word I really want to emphasize, so I'm probably going to read it twice. What helped you feel ready to use your living experiences to advocate for change? And I like the word ready, so I want to read it again. What helped you feel ready to use your living experiences to advocate for change? Because obviously, we go through our lives, and you've got to have that moment where you say, I'm now ready. I'll stop talking. Please, Ben, your thoughts.
Yeah, I felt ready when my own. I felt ready when I found that community that I was referring to, and I felt like I was a part of something that was good, and I felt accepted, and yeah, and that kind of gave me the confidence to start to look to go down this journey of trying to, be an advocate for people with disabilities. So, I guess the point I'm saying is that the first step's got to be yourself, feeling accepted and feeling like you belong to something, in order to really feel that you can do these sort of things. And it's really important to have good people in your life and a good community around you to be able to support you to do that. So, yeah, I think those things are really important when it comes to feeling ready, and also just encouragement. And yeah, so I just think it's really important for people to really try and do that and develop that for not just people with disabilities, but people in general. I just think that's really important.
Thanks so much, Ben. Beautiful answer. I'm now going to ask Judy to question 2. What helped you, Judy, to feel ready to use your living experiences to advocate for change?
I guess Speak Out where I work now helped me a lot to speak up and speak out. I got the confidence. I got the confidence in leading the way for myself and other people with intellectual disabilities. And I used that leadership skills, or I used my leadership tree, as I say. It takes a long time to become a self-advocate. You just can't do it overnight. So some of the things, I've got some dot points, I hope you don't mind.
Please.
So some of the things, so I became a representative of my for my region here in Tassie, or here in Burnie on the northwest coast. I became the president of Speak Out and represented everyone. I became a board member of Speak Out, and when you're a president, you also become a board member. I have also done a lot of things with human rights for people with intellectual disabilities. I also became an Our Voice member. I had the great support pushing me to do things and to be a part of a lot of these things. So I became an Our Voice member and a chair of Our Voice. and went to the UN. I went to the United Nations in Geneva twice as a co-chair and a delegate, and that made me speak up even more.
Thank you very much, Judy. William, going back to question 2, please, if you could please answer. What helped you feel ready to use your living experiences to advocate for change?
I think it kind of draws back to the original answer I gave with learning from other self-advocates and how they use their voices to impact certain movements. And I think I got to learn from not just people I mentioned, but there were other examples of the Crips movement back in the 1960s to the 1980s in the US. There was the film from Sarah Barton about Defiant Lives, which spoke about the deinstitutionalization movement and what did the original history look like. And I think learning from what that history was to what did people do current day helped me kind of shape how I would use my voice. I think outside of learning from those self-advocates, I think I'll echo what Judy said and going to as many opportunities to help people as possible. I was in project work for a very long time before I got into my leadership positions. So I went into varying projects to do with group homes, inclusive education, what does actual inclusive workplaces look like? What does speaking to government look like in reform? And I think doing things like the UN as well, going to New York myself in 2024, and I'll actually be returning this year in 2026 to do an intervention at the second round table, which is about resilient societies. And I think in reflection to those kinds of opportunities, you don't just get to see the bubble of what does Australian advocacy look like, what does advocacy across the world look like, and it really makes you think about what does our system do really well, but where are the gaps that we could do better as a country, and bringing that back to Australian government with the current state of things. I think politely saying that I think Australia has a lot to learn from people, and it's a really big privilege to be able to learn from people across the country, but also across the world.
Thanks so much, William. That's great. We're now up to question 3. And you'd imagine I'm going to get 3 very different answers because it's all talking about challenges. So I'll read from the script. What challenges did you face in becoming a leader? So Ben, we're going to go to you first, but I'll just repeat that again. What actually challenges did you face in becoming a leader? Thanks, Ben.
Well, first of all, I faced a lot of challenges within myself in terms of confidence and in terms of, and as I said, I had to, I had to go on a journey of getting diagnosed, had to go on a journey of finding some good places to belong and feel a bit of acceptance. So, I went through that phase. And then after that, variety of things. First of all, I didn't really have a real educational background because I really struggled in school. So, I had to overcome that. I had to kind of I had to overcome a lot of the challenges with other people and their mindset as well. So I mean, yeah. So I mean, I work now at Gold Coast Recreation and Sport, and I've worked there for about 17 years. It took me about 7 years of volunteering to end up with a job there, and a lot of that was due to the fact that, again, as I said, I struggled in school. I had to go to TAFE to learn disability, and I also, there was no job that was available. So that, just that as an example, kind of highlights quite a lot of the challenges that go on for people with disabilities. First of all, they find it hard to even survive school, let alone get an education. So then they've got to work even harder to overcome that. They've got to overcome the challenges that they've had. And then also, is there a job or an opportunity in place for them to lead? And it's kind of been the same with Special Olympics. I mean, I've stepped up as we call it an athlete leader, and I've been put into roles and positions, and I've served on my national board. I've served on the board of directors with the Kennedy family and Chris Pratt and Didier Drogba and all of those things. But just because there's a role there, does that mean that there's a mindset of those people to really listen and engage with people like me? And I can say at times there is, at times there isn't. Because again, is there a stereotype or a perception of the role that I have? And are there limitations that get caused around that? So I think the challenges are, again, a lot of it is societal. A lot of it's still, unfortunately, how we treat people with disabilities and how we perceive them. Too often, we're still putting them into categories, into roles. I mean, like recently, Barbie released a doll for people with autism and it had headphones. And the problem with that is, yes, there are people with autism that need headphones, but not all types of people with autism need headphones, and they don't always need them all the time. So how often are we doing that? I mean, how often is leadership for people with disabilities just doing a speech or just sitting on a committee versus real engagement? And also, have we really fixed the education system or the environment, the diagnostic system, and the narrative and all of that, so that people with disabilities can progress through those things like everybody else, to have the tools that everybody else has, or are far more likely to have, to be actually able to succeed? So I think those are the things we need to continue to try and address as we move forward. And we've got to shift the narrative away from inclusion being a nice thing to do, or, people are just born with rights, to no, this is actually something that we should do because it helps people be healthier, it helps people be more engaged, it helps the community, it reduces burden, and it creates value. So, yeah, I just think that, and I deal with those challenges, and I've broken through those challenges in a lot of different ways. I know I've created a lot of opportunities for other people with disabilities. And, and it's just something you got to work through, but it's just something we need to continue to work on, is how do we actually improve those things, and how do we get past the banner that says inclusion, or the statement that says inclusion, or the funding that is there to actually better results for people with disabilities, not just everybody else.
Thanks, Ben. I can't help myself because we're doing reflection at the end of this, but I just want to pick up on your comment about education. And I think people living experiences always struggle with the initial education, primary school, etc. But you know what? That's where living experiences start, even in the classroom. You may not vocalize it, but that's where the education really starts, when you are born and going as a child, and then you build on that as an adult. that's just my quick commentary based on what you said. So I love what you said, Ben, and thank you. Judy, please can I ask you, what challenges did you face in becoming a leader?
So having things in easy read, so for myself, I need things in easy read to be able to participate in things like on committees and boards. So having that first off, and then like I went to TAFE and I had to try and fight the system because they didn't want me to be in their classroom because I had a disability. And so that was a really hard, I guess for me, that was a really hard but hard thing to go about doing, but I did it with the help of others. I guess protecting myself and protecting sorry, I've got the wrong question. So I guess just the easy read, the easy English for other people and myself. Having things that we can do or saying that we can do instead of we can't do. There's no such word as can't. Or in my vocabulary, there's not. Those sorts of things that really make a difference to people with intellectual disabilities.
Thanks, Judy. Out of the corner of my eye, I'm seeing all these lovely hearts and emojis coming up on the screen. People love what we're saying at the moment, which is just really nice to know that we've got so many people out there listening. So thank you. William, please, I'll repeat the question. What challenges did you face in becoming a leader?
Thanks, John. And Judy and Ben really spoke to a lot of things that I resonate with. I think there's a fair few challenges I can think of. And I think the first thing is having the opportunity to save your lived experience for times that are needed instead of 24/7 advocating all the time. Because there's a lot of things, especially in community, you can see a lot of media, you can see a lot of discrimination in workplaces or how people do practices, and you'll want to change absolutely everything because you see something not working. And traditional self-advocacy 101 is speak up if you don't like something. And I think I learned that from the self-advocacy training that I got here at Valid, but I think one of the additional lessons I had to learn how to do after I left Valid as a staff member and joined as a board member was learning how to preserve my lived experience and my own personal capacity, to make sure that, my heart wasn't broken every single time I didn't like, something that was going on, like, NDIS reform. I'm not just a board member or a self-advocate. I'm also an NDIS participant. I'm also an uncle to two nieces who have disabilities too. I'm a family member to multitudes of people with varying diagnoses. And I really agreed with Ben when he spoke about how things are represented versus how things need to be shown when it comes to disability in mainstream. Because I think I saw like a lot of similar controversy about the autism Barbie, because I'm also autistic myself. And there was a part of me that was like, finally we get representation that's so incredible. But then there was the other side of it where I was like, yeah, but that doesn't represent my specific experience either. And I think at the end of the day, that is really okay. I don't think something needs to be everybody's individual experiences. And I think another challenge I find is there's a lot of negative stigma with how disability is a singular issue, and it doesn't talk about the crossover into other things like multicultural. It doesn't talk about mob or rainbow mob intersections with LGBTIQ issues, and it also doesn't talk about dual diagnosis either. If somebody has intellectual disability, they might also have an autistic diagnosis like I do. Or if somebody's autistic, they might also have another disability like CP um, or many other examples like psychosocial or etc. And I think there needs to be more conversation about disability not being a singular issue. It needs to be we need to get rid of that silo. If we're moving into the human rights model of disability, we've now done the social model as a sector, not perfectly, but we've gotten there. And I think we now, if we want to get into the human rights model like everybody is preaching for, then we need to stop this disability siloing, and we need disability to be involved in every single conversation.
Wow. I'm pausing for my own sake because I think you've just smashed it. You've said some lovely words. Um, I always pick on things that stay in my mind after listening to people. And we spoke about the word preserve. And I want to say that's a really important word, because the opposite of preserve, believe it or not, can be disability burnout. So good on you raising it. And I'm not sure if it's a skill or it's something that you learn to do, because it's a really important thing, because we all just want to be human and live and breathe and be happy and in all of those emotions at the same time. You've demonstrated you wear so many other hats, and your brain is going out so many directions. So in addition, I just say I'm sure you've got moments where you also self-love and just do things that make you happy. But thank you very much for that. So that was question 3. And we're now going to be talking about reflections. So obviously everybody will share, all the speakers will share their thoughts on the reflections. I'm having a breathe because I think it's just not overwhelming. It's just lovely to hear all these words. So the reflection, we're asking all of you to please comment, all of our speakers. What advice would you share with others who may want to use their lived experience to become leaders? I'm going to ask you again because it's a really important question. What advice would you share with others who may want to use their own living experiences to become leaders? I'll start with you, please, Ben.
Yeah, what advice? I think maybe try and figure out, first of all, I guess why you want to do that, what your purpose is, or what your goal is. I think that's important to kind of get clear on. I think also seeking advice or seeking good people in that space that you can talk to, I think is really important. I think I think starting off small, trying to, if you want to be a public speaker in this space, or you want to serve in policy in this space, or you want to start an organization that helps people out to make a difference, or just want to start a local community organization, I think try and start off there. So try and figure out the steps that you need to do to achieve that, I think is really important. And the beauty of our world today is so many things are online. So there is always avenues that you can find to be able to find people that you can talk to, or find ways to be able to do things. So I think exploring that as much as you can, learn as much as you can, try and find some good mentors or good people that you get advice from, and don't give up. Don't think that you can't do it, and be persistent with it. Every day, like just be really persistent with it. You're going to have ups and downs. There's no doubt about that. You're going to have some challenges, but just keep trying to make it work, and just have belief in yourself. I think is really important. And yeah, like any sort of changes that you can make in the community is really beneficial, not just to yourself, but to others. And yeah, I think I think being honest, like looking at the world we're living in at the moment, I don't think there is enough of a thought process, or how can I say it? I think the world needs more people looking to try and do that, regardless of whether they have a disability or not. And I think you can do so much just in your local community, let alone anywhere else. And I think it's really important that more people are empowered to do that. And the reality is if you want a world, or you want a community that has acceptance and that sort of stuff, you've got to try and put your own effort in to make that happen. So I just think that's really, really important. And I don't see any reason why people can't pursue that. I'm not saying it will be easy, but yeah, I think there's a whole variety of things that you can do. But start small, find some advice, make it clear on what you want to do, and go out there and try and make it happen.
Ben, I'm going to ask you a question that's not on the script, because I really like what you've just been saying with your reflection. There's a famous song, I Get Knocked Down, But I Get Up Again. I'm just wondering if you may remember that song, and how do you identify that someone's not sharing your purpose or not on your side? Do you have a special filter that you can see it quite quickly if they're not supportive?
Yeah, that's a skill I've had to develop, and I've had to learn. And again, I've got good mentors that help me with that. We have conversations about those sort of things. It is something that unfortunately will happen. I think you've always got to try and learn to get past, because I know so often today we say words matter, and they do, but it's also the meaning and the actions behind the words as well. And also, you know, reality is failure is a part of any process towards improvement or trying to do anything as well.
Well said.
So it's just
Totally agree.
something that has to be a part of that situation.
Yeah. And if I might just add personally, if people do challenge something you've done or a decision or may not disagree, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That just gives you a moment to reflect sometimes and go back to your people and talk to your tribe to say, other people don't like what I'm doing, and which is okay. I actually like it. So thank you, Ben, very much for sharing your thoughts. Judy, please, reflection question. What advice would you give to share with others who may want to use their own living experiences to become a leader? So when I say share, what tips would you tell to someone like yourself, or even, I guess I'm going to say younger people also, because as you know, we need a lot more younger people becoming advocates. And you're a living legend in relation to you've done it. You all are. But what would you? I want to change the question. What would you tell the young Judy inside you if you used to do it again?
Thank you for that, John. It's a really good question. So, get yourself a mentor or get yourself a person that you can really talk to, really trust. But also believe in yourself. Now, if you don't believe in yourself, no one else will. And you know that I guess that's really important to me. And to the people that I talk to is believing in yourself, being your own mentor, no, or trying to mentor others. Talk to the person that who's your mentor. You know, trust and believe in them. And talk to people with disabilities that look up to you have or have done things differently. Yeah, I guess experience, like the great Sir Robert Martin was a great mentor. For myself and many other people with intellectual disabilities. And like I was able to speak to him about what he did, and he was amazing at just sitting there telling you his story, but also talking to you about your story.
And I think I'll just summarize for what you just said, Judy. The last few words, there is so much power in listening to stories, because I'm going to listen to other people that may have a different disability to me, being in a wheelchair, but I still learn a lot. And I love learning from kids too. Believe it or not, I have kids that come up to me and say, "Why do you have funny shaped hands?" And I think they're really great questions. And I thank the parents and I thank the kid for coming up to ask, because we need to learn and listen. So it's a real privilege to be a person with lived experience and sharing with others, but in the balance. Thanks, Judy. William, tell us, please, what would you share with others who may want to use their living experiences to become leaders?
I think there's a lot of, again, this is a very layered question, because I think there's so many things that contribute to having lived experience become leadership in a meaningful way. But I think firstly, I noticed that there were some questions in the Q&A, and I think I'll address some of the things that was said in those and kind of close with a closing comment, which I think how you select your supporters as a person with lived experience really depends on how much we trust you as an individual. And that's how we end up selecting whether you deserve to be our mentor or not. Because there's been a lot of conversation from, Ben, myself, and Judy about how mentors are a really crucial piece to lived experience translating into lived experience leadership. And I think you want to have your lived experience listened to, and you want to be part of those advocacy initiatives and projects and working groups. But we need to know our lived experience is being used for the right reason, and we need to know that our lived experience is not just being used to be a document that's going to be shelved and collect dust over the next 10 years. We need to know that it's actually being used because it's our lives, it's our trauma, and it's also what we've been through in life through the system. And we need to know that lived experience is being used properly. And we're more than willing to give it. We've proven that through the advocacy movement and time again. But we need you as the community to prove that you're going to utilize that lived experience properly. And I think that is a really important factor to how we select our supporters. Is we trust you if you are classified as our supporter, whether it's a family blood relative, whether it's a support worker, whether it's a staff member that we really trust, or somebody that we just met on the street and they have been our friend for 20 plus years. It doesn't matter where they come from. That trust sticks if we trust you. And I think I reflect on a question from Sarah, and like, how do you get a message across if they're not listening to your viewpoint or not understanding your viewpoint? I think all you can do is give your perspective and be open to listening to the other person's experience in that conversation. Even if you do disagree with it, this has been one of the hardest lessons for me, is part of a conversation is listening both ways and giving the chance for the other person to speak to you about that issue. And it doesn't necessarily mean you agree, but you're giving them that space to speak their truth. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, because I reflect on Sir Robert Martin, who's now passed away. And he's been a very influential person in the United Nations intellectual disability advocacy space. And one of his quotes was, "I believe every person can live in the community with the right support. No ifs, no buts, no maybes." And I think that really resonates with this question.
Thanks, William. Wow, another big breath from me, because I think it's just so beautiful to hear all these important messages. We are going to address the other Q&As, and I'm going to invite another valid staff member to step in, and who's going to read out some of the questions. And
Thanks, John, and thank you, everyone. Some great reflections and insights about lived experience leadership. We've got a couple of questions that came in to the chat box, and I know Will has started answering a couple of those. So the first question is, how do you get your message across to the other party when you're not being heard or listened to? Ben, would you like to answer the question?
Yeah, there's probably a variety of things. I think sometimes you've got to accept what sort of role you have within that and what sort of level of control that you have. And what I mean by that is sometimes you're not going to get through to people. Sometimes they're just not going to really engage with what you're saying, which is unfortunate, but it's just an unfortunate reality of what goes on. But I think otherwise, it's really just about trying to be as persistent as you can, trying to come across as respectful as you can. Because, I know we've talked about the fact that we want people to validate us and respect us. I know we've got to try and show the same. And also trying to listen to what they're saying back or what's going on, but also trying to realize that what they're saying or what they're engaging with can be their perspective and I guess their energy, if you want to call it. And if they are being closed-minded or being negative, just try and remind yourself that that's just a reflection of who they are. It's not really a reflection of you. So again, it comes back to, if you want to do these things, it is about having these sort of conversations about what this is like and having good support around you. is always important, particularly having people who will, pick you up and remind you that, that was just one of those situations. Let's try and move on and try and be positive. But as I said, there's only a certain amount of things you can do when it comes to those sort of situations, and there's only so much you can do. At the end of the day, if they're not wanting to engage, you can't change that.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump in here, very conscious of time. We thought this would happen because there's so much passion out there, but we went to finish in about 4 minutes. So, Gordon, I'm money to just quickly pick up another question,
Sure.
and but just conscious of time because I need to do a little wrap up.
Yeah.
So we'll do one very quick one, if you don't mind, with a quick answer.
Sure. Can I just read quickly a couple of comments that came in? So many amazing insights, suggestions, and stories. Thank you for that. Leadership is spot on, Judy. So lots of good comments coming in. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. And John, great facilitation. A comment in for you. I might just finish with a question for Judy. So in terms of finding a mentor, how much shared lived experience do you recommend when looking for a mentor?
I guess if you feel like sharing a lot, do that, but also just be mindful in what you're sharing and who you're sharing it with. I guess just because you don't want to be putting yourself out too much, but you do want that mentor, if you know what I mean. So I guess for me, I'd be looking for a person that knew me. First of all, knew me. Second of all, I could trust and they could trust me, because trust is an important part of being a mentor and having mentors.
Thank you, Judy. Over to you, John.
Okay, thank you. It is time for a bit of wrap up. So I just remind everybody, we have been listening to the Valid webinar, and we've had some great speakers, Ben, Judy, and William. A couple of, not commercials, but important announcements I'd like to share with everybody. Note that the Valid's Advocacy in Action Conference is on June 22nd and 23rd at the Novotel Function Centre in Preston. Flyer and registration link are now being shared in the chat box. Thank you again for all of you who have been part of this conversation, because obviously it's been interesting listening, and I know there's a lot of comments which we haven't had a chance to go through. I apologise for that. A feedback survey will appear on the screen after you leave, so please take the time to fill that in. That would be great. And also, I'd like to, one more thing. Stay tuned for next webinar. That will be up on the Valid website. But obviously, our audience is to all, but for people with intellectual disability that could really benefit from seeing this webinar a few times, I reach out to everybody to understand it has been recorded, so it's going to be on the Valid website. So I'd like to think that these stories and conversations we've had today are going to be a great tool for everybody when it comes to advocating and using your living experiences to be a leader. So once again, thank you, Judy, thank you, William, and thank you, Ben, and also the staff behind Valid to pull this together. And of course, our Auslan interpreter. Thank you very much. And stay tuned, and wishing you all health and happiness.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thanks, Sorgal.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John.